Hi, my name is Carly Poth, and I will be discussing the effects of exclusive knowledge and how European accounts and actions were detrimental to the Aztec society. Exclusive knowledge is the notion that some group has exclusive and superior knowledge about how the world works. It encompasses three specific assumptions. First, that one's group has special access to knowledge about the order and the workings of natural and social life. Second, that there is something superior and final about such knowledge. Third, that others' knowledge claims are inadequate or defective compared to the unique and superior groups. The concept of exclusive knowledge has been detrimental to various cultures and societies as it has led groups to make false and premature judgments. An example of this can be seen. This is hard!
Why are you yelling?
I'm mad. It's hard. I keep forgetting to push the slide button.
Are you getting it?
Yeah, it works now. This is the one. I'm feeling it. Hi, my name is Carly Poth, and I will be talking about the effects of exclusive knowledge and how European accounts and actions were detrimental to the Aztec society. Exclusive knowledge is the notion that some group has exclusive and superior knowledge about how the world works. It encompasses three specific assumptions. First, that one's group has special access to knowledge about the order and the workings of natural and social life. Second, that there is something superior and final about such knowledge. And third, that others' knowledge claims are inadequate or defective compared to the unique and superior group. An example of this can be seen in the relationship between the Europeans and the Aztecs. The arrival of Hernando Cortez sparked the interaction between the Europeans and the Aztecs. Each of these societies was unique and unusual to one another in terms of their political, economic, and social practices. In result, biased opinions began to arise within each society. This was particularly true about the Europeans as it created a strong sense of inherent superiority and ethnocentrism, otherwise referred to as exclusive knowledge. In result, European accounts have limited the audience's understandings of the Aztec civilization. This is because these accounts strive to inform the audience how the Aztecs are different from the Europeans rather than why the Aztecs are different from the Europeans. For this reason, I feel as if exclusive knowledge was unfavorable to the Aztec society. When we analyze the accounts of the Europeans, we find that all three assumptions of exclusive knowledge are present and that the result of these accounts and actions following them were detrimental to the Aztecs. Now, before I begin analyzing accounts, I would like to give a brief history of the conquest of the empire. Now, here I have created a map to try and help give a better visual. Alright, so the Aztec Empire reached its height in the early 16th century under the Emperor Montezuma. That was also the same time the Spanish adventurers were swarming by the hundreds to the West Indies following the discovery of the Americas in 1492 by Christopher Columbus. The first contact with Mexico, though, occurred in 1517. Now this is over here. So this started in Cuba, and the Spanish governor of Cuba sent Francisco Hernandez de Corbada with a small fleet to the Yucatan. If you follow this red line, this is about the course they took. When they got to the Yucatan, they were invited to come to the shore and onto the land by the Mayans. Now, soon after they arrived on land, some Mayan tribes from the west came and ambushed the Spanish, and the Spanish had to leave and go back to Cuba. Now, after this, 1518, the Spanish governor of Cuba then sent a third expedition under Hernando Cortez, landing on the coast of Veracruz. So first they sailed over all the way back to the Yucatan, and here he found a survivor of a shipwreck who had learned Mayan, and this was an Old English shipwreck. Then they followed along the coast here, along this yellow line, and came down, and right about here they found a Mayan woman who knew Aztec. So together these people were able to translate for Cortez and for the conquistadors. So they then traveled up against this yellow line here, and here they traveled all the way to Tlaxcala, and this was just a bunch of different bands of the Aztec people. Now first they fought Cortez, and then they found that that wasn't the easiest solution and began to ally with him because they were having neighbors with conflict with Aztecs over here. So this was where Cortez heard the Aztec Empire was. So he gathered all these people together to come and try and take over the land in 1519. Alright, now that Cortez was in the Aztec Empire, this is where we begin to see the first account. The first one I'll analyze is a letter sent by Hernando Cortez, leader of the conquistadors. At the time, Cortez was sending Charles V, King of Spain, updates during his duration in the Aztec Empire. You'll see Cortez to your left and King Charles V to your right. In one letter that Cortez sent to King Charles V, he described witnessing an Indian eating a piece of flesh from the body of another Indian who had just been murdered. In this picture to the left, it kind of depicts what he may have seen. Cortez was astonished by this sight, and he burned the Indian that was eating the flesh. Cortez then went on to inform Montezuma that all people must abstain from these customs. This is Montezuma to the right, the Aztec leader. He then said and wrote to the king, "I came to protect their lives as well as their property, and to teach them that they were to adore but one God, that they must turn from their idols and the rites they had practiced until then, for these were lies and deceptions which the devil had invented." Now, when we analyze this account, it becomes evident that the last two assumptions are present. That there was something superior and final about Cortez's words to Montezuma, and that Cortez found the Aztec claims to be inadequate or defective compared to his own, regardless of the Aztec opinions or objectives. Although many may not have read his personal letter, it was sent to an extremely powerful man with a lot of influence. King Charles was taken back by the words of Cortez and in turn granted Cortez permission to take action as he felt necessary. Accounts similar to these letters made acts such as looting, pillaging, and destroying the Aztec civilization justifiable. This is one example of how Europeans and exclusive knowledge were detrimental to the Aztecs, and Cortez began treating the Aztecs strictly as barbarians. Now, another example of this can be found in Bernal Diaz's chronicle. To the left you'll see Bernal Diaz, and to the right you'll see the chronicle. He was the head soldier in Cortez's army. Diaz's chronicle describes his reactions to the Aztec religion and civilization. Diaz's first witness of the Aztec religion was in a temple where Montezuma allowed his group to enter the temple of the gods. He described a room with tall gods laced in fine jewels. The room was full of death, human hearts offered to the gods, floors blackened with old and fresh blood, and an odor that was far too nauseating to withstand. Diaz was overwhelmed by this experience, and being a Christian man, he found these practices to be barbaric. Diaz continued to describe in the chronicle that the Aztecs lacked knowledge and understanding about the workings of the true Word of God. Here, exclusive knowledge is present again. We see the first assumption is present that one's group has special access to knowledge about the order and the workings of natural and social life. Today, some may argue that a large majority of Diaz's chronicle sought only to justify the Europeans' actions. Although this was typically true, a few accounts describe the Aztecs in a positive manner. This sheds a little light on how some conquistadors, such as Cortez, strove to ruin any positive account of the Aztec people more than others did. In the chronicle, Diaz illustrates to readers a beautiful society that was like anything he had laid eyes upon. He then continued to describe one of the largest, most organized, most populated markets he had ever seen. Some may say this is biased because surely he is going off what he knows. However, if we research the author, we will find that Bernal Diaz had been in many parts of the world, from Constantinople to Rome to the New World, indicating to readers that it is not bias but experience leading him to this conclusion. And here on this screen, we will be able to see different ideas of what these marketplaces may have looked like to the left and how innovative these people were with their floating gardens and their way of irrigation. Now, if we take Diaz's accounts, we can conclude that readers could infer the Aztec civilization had a running economy and a thriving population, demonstrating that they had access to enough resources to maintain the lives of many, and additionally the resources to create not only goods but jobs for citizens. Unfortunately, this depiction of Aztec society was overpowered by various other accounts claiming the Aztecs to be barbarians. From this, we can conclude that exclusive knowledge is not only prevalent in the author's accounts, but in the audience's understanding of these accounts. The audience could have thought about this depiction and found some significance in it, but instead, exclusive knowledge intervened, and the differences did not match their superior knowledge about how the world works. It is important to realize how such a simple action as choosing the importance of what you read can be detrimental to a society such as the Aztecs. Now, the European accounts of the Aztec civilization strove to represent and articulate on components of the Aztec culture that they knew would appall their audiences. In this way, they would gain greater justification of their actions. However, I wonder what the European community would have thought of the Aztec accounts of the Europeans they encountered. I wonder if they would have second-guessed the barbaric nature of the Aztecs that the European accounts made them out to be. For this reason, indigenous accounts are extremely important. Unfortunately, for the Aztecs, the Europeans were quick to burn any accounts of European behavior composed by the Aztec civilization. However, now some of these accounts have been recovered. Mexican historian and philosopher Miguel Leon Portilla set out to recover the indigenous representations of the conquests of the Aztecs. He compiled all of his findings in the Aztecs' account of the conquest of Mexico. These accounts are important to analyze as they allow us to see how blinding exclusive knowledge can be, as it figures that others' knowledge claims are inadequate or defective compared to the unique and superior group, which in this case would be the Europeans. Now, one account in Portilla's book, Broken Spears, illustrates how at first the Europeans were recognized as gods, coming home to take the throne after years of war. Little did the Aztecs know that these men were merely there to gain resources, wealth, and conquer, which they eventually realized. One account documented by the Aztec describes the terrible slaughter perpetrated by Pedro de Alvarado in the patio of the main temple in Tenochtitlan, the empire. It illustrates how the Spaniards ran into the ceremony and forced their way to the music to cut off the drummer's arms and then his head. It then describes how many were cut in their abdomens and then began running only to trip over their entrails. This account claims there was no escape. An additional account mentioned in this book derives from the Florentine Codex, nicknamed for a project called The History of the Things of New Spain. It was written between 1545 and 1590. The book was overseen by a Franciscan friar named Bernardo de Sahagún, who had arrived in Mexico with the goal of converting the indigenous populations to Christianity. He intended for his research to describe the ancient cultures of this new world and to create a vocabulary of Nahuatl, the Aztec language. His research took place over several decades, and the original manuscript consisted of over 2,400 pages, spread out over 12 books. This author compiled this work by speaking with local elders and looking to his students for their expertise. The section I will discuss illustrates the mass amount of groups that approached the Aztec Empire. They traveled inwards in files of 6, all armed in some manner. While all these files are important to analyze, I think the most significant file to discuss is File 5. The 5th file of men approaching were harquebuses. This was the common name for soldiers or cavalry throughout the 16th and 17th century because they carried harquebuses, or barrel firearms. The codex states that some harbusiers were shouldering their harbuses and that some were holding them aimed at the civilians. When they went into the empire, they repeatedly shot off their guns. They exploded, sputtered, and discharged. As this went on, it grew dark with smoke, and as it spread, every place filled with smoke. The foul smell made people dizzy and faint, according to the codex. Now, after analyzing both of these indigenous accounts, it is hard to imagine that the Aztec people were any more barbaric than the Europeans invading their territory. For this reason, it is crucial to analyze the accounts of the Aztecs as well. If Europeans in this time frame had read of all the wrongdoings proceeding in Mexico, I am not so sure that things would have fanned out the way they did. This is another example how exclusive knowledge was detrimental to the Aztec society, as the Europeans disregarded the claims of the Aztecs because theirs was superior. Now, in conclusion, from analyzing various European accounts of the Aztec Empire, we are able to infer that such accounts and results of these were harmful to the Aztecs. This was evident as each one contained all three assumptions of exclusive knowledge: that the Europeans had special access to knowledge about the order and the workings of natural and social life, that there was something superior and final about such knowledge, and that others' knowledge, the Aztecs' claims, are inadequate or defective compared to the unique or superior group, which would in this case be the Europeans. For this reason, it is important for readers to be aware of exclusive knowledge when reading such accounts, to eliminate making false and premature judgments about cultures that differ from our own.